Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you back to the Dynamic Decisions podcast, where we explore the strategies that drive successful decision making in the world of business. Why? Because the best decisions come from great conversations. I'm your host, Teasha Cable, CEO of C Model Data. Today, we have a true leader in education, technology, and social impact. His name is Alvaro. He's the president, CEO, and founder of Deware. He is a visionary entrepreneur whose background in engineering and project management, including work at Grupo Corp Data and Jean Singh Telecommunication, has fueled his passion to solve massive social problems. So for nearly 9 years, he's led Deware, a technology-driven education company dedicated to lowering the cost of education and providing access to quality high school education across Latin America. So I am so grateful, Alvaro, for you being here today. Would you tell us more about you, more about Deware, kind of give us the whole spiel about your life all over again?
Sure. Thank you so much, Teacha, for having me for this invitation. I'm so excited about having this conversation. I started Deware when I was pretty young. I was about 25 years old. And I was inspired by the situation in my home country, Venezuela. I'm a Venezuelan. And there was this political turmoil. And I was thinking about how could I do something to better the situation of Venezuela. And the more I thought about it, I eventually got to the conclusion that our problem was in education. You know, there was not enough access to quality education for everyone, right? And that became a passion, even though I'm a telecommunications engineer. And that's my background. I knew nothing about education, but it's just the more I researched the topic, the more I was convinced that with technology, we could really had an immense impact on education, not only in Venezuela, but in Latin America. So that became the spark that started our company. And since then, we've learned so much about what are the obstacles that prevent youth in Latin America from finishing their high school education. And we have been able to launch online schools. We launched the first online school in Venezuela, the first online school in Dominican Republic, the first online school in Honduras. We launched schools in Colombia, Mexico, and we launched our Florida school. And right now, our Florida school is our most successful online school. And the U.S. has been great to us. It's a great place for doing business. The legal framework for providing education worldwide is there. So it's been really a blessing to be able to do that from Florida. Now, since about a year ago, we launched our SaaS product. It's a white label SaaS product educational platform for governments, schools, and entrepreneurs to launch their own online high school, quality online high school. And, you know, that's taken off now. And we're convinced that that's a great way of having a greater impact. You know, not every student in Latin America or underserved youth in Latin America is going to be able to go to the Deware, but there's going to be a more plural market with more offerings, more schools, online schools. And we want to build the digital infrastructure for that to happen. So that's where we are right now.
So that's super interesting. So the ed tech market itself has really become increasingly bifurcated. So you got these venture-backed platforms. They chase these affluent markets. You got premium pricing. And then you still have populations like the ones that you want to serve with the greatest educational need. And they remain underserved, mostly because the unit economics don't really attract investment in that area. But you've kind of built Deware to serve teenage mothers, migrants, other kinds of victims, you know, these populations that traditional ed tech is largely going to ignore. Can you walk us through a moment when you faced pressure maybe to pivot towards a more attractive customer segment with higher willingness to pay, even if it meant you might abandon these communities that really inspired Deware's founding?
That's such an interesting question. You know, like the big players, they're all in the U.S. and they have such a rich market over there that they're not interested or attracted to the Latin American market. It's such a fragmented market to go after, right? And the U.S. government is a big buyer of education technology, so they are, they have their hands full with the U.S. market. And when I reached out to these companies, Admentum, Pearson, and these big companies, and I asked them if they had a digital curriculum in Spanish, like every subject in Spanish for the Latin American market. They didn't have one. They had Spanish as a subject because they have the American curriculum. And then, so we had to build our own digital curriculum video classes. We developed over 2,000 video classes, lectures, study guides, formative assessments, summative assessments, projects. And all of that became our core offering for the white label SaaS product. We have the most comprehensive digital curriculum in Spanish for the Latin American market, adapted to the different standards for all the ministries of education in Latin America. And then you said, you asked about the pressures of going after these more attractive markets. And that is so true, and it happens. And we kind of have to maintain the focus on our mission, which is to democratize access to quality education in Latin America. Because what we've seen is that as we increase our prices, we still find a market, because we started out so low. Our monthly payments for our schooling was so low. And then as we've been raising our prices, we still find a market. And it's easier, of course, to lead a business when you have higher prices. But then we start to get too expensive for the people that we originally wanted to serve. So we are now, and that's one of our main struggles.
Yeah.
How can we go with more volume without more volume, so that we don't have to raise our prices? But the problem with volume is that if you start doing more marketing, more investing in that, then that immediately has to be factored into the price for the student. So we have to be able to get the word out without spending a lot of money. So in fact, we're thinking about doing a podcast such as yourself to help us get the word around.
I think it's a great education tool. I mean, think about how often you might listen to a podcast on your own just to get tidbits and just to learn a little something. And then I wanted to talk about things that are super meaningful on this podcast for that reason, things that are going to be not just meaningful for selling my product, because that's not really the key, but for people to really learn and gain insight into how their decision making actually impacts their business. So on that note, and following along what you just said, when you're making these platform architecture decisions, how do you navigate the tension between building robust systems that work in stable environments with reliable connectivity versus designing for the intermittent internet, for example, or aging devices and payment uncertainties that really characterize the markets where your students live? So I want to know a little bit about how you see the human cost when generally ed tech companies optimize for ideal conditions rather than these real world constraints. And I'm trying to see, are there ways that you think about these types of decisions and how that might shape your technical choices?
Oh, definitely. At the beginning, we said, we can't solve we can't solve every problem at the same time. There's just going to be some people that don't have the internet connection to really benefit from our services. But eventually, we got to build an mobile app, iOS and Android app, where students can download the content to their phones when they have access to a Wi-Fi connection. And then once they go to their town or their village or whatever they might be, they can study without an internet connection. So that was very important. And we know a lot of people are using that app. And we finally were able to provide a fulfilling response to the people that said, what do we do with all of these population that doesn't have access to internet connection? And like that decision, we've made so many decisions in the design of our product, thinking about the low income families in Latin America. And for example, another decision that we made, thinking about people are going to lose internet connection in the middle of a test or they're going to lose their electricity in the middle of a test, then we said, okay, let's provide several opportunities for each test. So if the
That's
power
good.
goes out when you're taking a test, then you have another chance to do it. And I guess that's why it's important that this type of solutions came from an entrepreneur living in Latin America. You know, you have that insight of what people might need. So yeah, those are those type of decisions were baked in every part of the building of the software. That's why we are I believe the best solution for students in Latin America and for schools in Latin America serving this type of students.
So you're working with the UNHCR, you're serving displaced populations and MLB academies, preparing these young athletes, which is two radically different contexts with completely different success metrics, different completion incentives, and of course, different family support structures. So traditional ed tech achieves economies at scale through standardization, but these populations need fundamentally different pedagogical approaches and support systems. When you are deciding how you're going to improve an outcome for one segment, but it might potentially harm another segment, how do you actually go about doing that? One of the things that comes to mind for me is, do you use gamification at all? That might motivate athletes, but it might feel trivial to a teenage mom who's studying between childcare and her responsibilities. How do you choose which of these things makes sense for your company and what you guys are doing?
Well, first you'll be surprised of how similar MLB players are from displaced or migrant students in Latin America, because a lot of these MLB players come from low income families, which only option was sports, you know, and they drop out of school at very early age to pursue this baseball dream. And once they get signed and they get to the Dominican Republic, and yeah, the teams become responsible of these uh, young athletes, is that they get a second chance of completing their high school education, and that's when they enroll in the wedding. So a lot of these baseball players really need the support and the attention that we provide for migrants and refugees in Trinidad and Tobago or in Aruba, where we have migrant schools. So yeah, basically, once you design for the underserved, first we have several programs, you know, different programs for different type of students. So that's the way that we separate and say this is going to be our most rigorous program with all the tools, all the standards from Cognia. Cognia is the biggest accreditation agency in the US, and they provide like quality standards, and once you comply with those standards you get like a quality seal. So that's kind of one of the ways that we measure that we are providing quality education. And some programs really go and pursue excellence in that regard, and then other programs are for adults or for people that want to graduate faster. And depending on the student that we get, our admissions committee then recommends the program that these students should enroll into and pursue for their high school education. But mostly, when we were thinking about all of these decisions, software wise or content wise, we were always thinking about being very, I don't know if the word is rigorous, or having
Yeah.
high standards for
Yeah.
everyone, because we believe that these kids, even though they're migrants and they're refugees and they come from, you know, humble backgrounds, we believe that they can measure up and they have the potential in them. It's just that they haven't had the opportunity. So now that we're providing the opportunity, we didn't want to lowball them. We want to to have high standards and let them really develop and yeah, and reach their full potential. So that's kind of the core thing. We always take decisions based on the students and the best outcome long term for the student. Our first value is love the student, and that
Yeah.
and those values are meant to guide our decision making, right?
I
So
love that. I like that, and I want to stay there on my next question, which is so you moving from just serving Latin American markets to registering with the Florida Department of Education. So that represents crossing into a completely different regulatory and competitive environment. When you decided this, when you were kind of deciding whether to pursue this type of expansion, how did you weigh the opportunity? Speaking of opportunity, how did you decide to weigh this opportunity to really reach a new student population? What were some of the trade-offs that you had to make between the path of maximizing student impact versus one that builds this enterprise value that I'm pretty sure your company still exists
Yeah.
to get and really attract new institutional partnerships?
Well, it was based most on necessity because when we were in Latin America, a lot of the countries where we were operating in didn't have a legal framework for virtual education. And this was something that was difficult to explain to American investors because they saw online schooling like commonplace. There's 300 online schools in the U.S., but we were the first in most of the countries in Latin America, and we were operating on a gray area of the law. Like the law didn't say we couldn't do it, but it didn't say that we could. So that's kind of where we operated in, and we actually faced a lot of persecution from various ministries of education in Latin America. So we were rebels in that regard. and and the U.S. was a safe harbor, and they really understand online education. We found Cognia, which gave us the standards of how quality online education looks like, because we were trailblazers. We were just learning as we go. It was all very trial and error. And then we
Mhm.
found this 120-year-old organization that says, no, no, these are the standards.
Yeah.
Comply with this. And it was good. We comply with it. And then, we have our own ideas and our own vision of what online education has to be for Latin Americans. But it was good to have this standards, comply with it, and then tell the world, we got this seal. We are doing a good job. Our students are striving. We are taking standardized tests, and our students are performing above average American students. So that meant for us that we were very proud of that. And so yeah, it was out of necessity. We basically landed where we were understood and where we were given an opportunity.
Opportunity is everything. Hey, this message is for our audience. Think about your own organization's approach to social impact and technology. What tech driven decisions have created the most meaningful, scalable impact on your community or industry outcomes? Share your experiences with us on LinkedIn and other social media using Dynamic Decisions Podcast. Okay, I want to go into my favorite segment, which is your decision-making persona. So we're going to explore your decision-making style through a persona assessment. I'm going to ask you 4 questions which represent decision-making approaches. And after each one, you're going to tell me how much it resonates with you and how you actually approach decisions. And you're going to give a scale of 0 to 100%. But here's the thing. You only get 100% across all 4. So you have to keep track. Does that make sense?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got
And
it.
no, nope, nope, nope. I cannot give them all to you up front. That doesn't happen. You have to answer after each one
Okay.
that I give you. Okay. Because people ask. So I'm just saying, no, this is my show. I get to do what I want to do. So that's how it works. So here's the first one. You ready? It's called the feeler. This is a values-driven leader. So this persona prioritizes alignment with core values and mission, often weighing the human impact and cultural fit of decisions alongside business metrics. So when considering partnership opportunities or new revenue streams for Deware, I find myself asking, beyond the business opportunity, how does this decision affect the students who have the fewest alternatives? If we partner with a well-funded private school network, we could generate revenue that subsidizes our work with refugees and teenage mothers. That's the rational justification. But I wrestle with whether building infrastructure optimized for affluent students gradually shifts our product DNA away from the populations we exist to serve.
Yeah.
Every hour our engineers spend on features that appeal to premium markets is an hour not spent solving connectivity issues for the students with unreliable internet. There's a
Yeah.
risk that mission drift happens gradually through individual rational decisions that collectively transform us into something that might be unrecognizable. So, When the path to financial sustainability requires us to serve markets we don't intend to serve, how do I ensure we don't wake up 5 years from now having built a successful business that abandoned its founding purpose? So, how much does this approach to decisions by asking yourself values based questions resonate with you? I'm going to make it real hard for you, by the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, I'm gonna say 40% here.
Give me
40.
a little why. Yeah, tell me.
I think this is a big one for us. A lot of our decisions come with this values alignment. What we intend, what we want our impact to be in the world. And really that North Star, that passion, that mission is what has kept us strong during difficult times. And without it, this company would not exist. So I think it's a big one. I'm going to
Okay.
say 50.
50%. Okay. Woo. Come on. Big spender. Big spender. So that leaves you got 50% left for the next three. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so this one is called the planner. It's a strategic visionary. So this persona focuses on long-term implications and future-proofing decisions, always thinking several moves ahead and considering multiple scenarios. So when making strategic decisions about Deware's technology platform and market expansion, I'm simultaneously planning for three very different futures. In one scenario, governments increasingly recognize alternative credentials and online learning, opening massive markets for accredited virtual education across Latin America. In another, regulatory backlash against online diplomas intensifies amid concerns about quality and fraud, making our credentials less valuable or requiring expensive compliance that changes our unit economics entirely. In a third scenario, AI disrupts traditional curriculum delivery completely, where our library of 1,200 video classes could either become a major differentiator or an obsolete asset, depending on how we architect around emerging technologies. Each future requires different capabilities. The first rewards our existing model at scale. The second demands much deeper institutional partnerships and credentialing infrastructure. And the third requires fundamentally rethinking what curriculum even means. Do I optimize for the future? I believe is most likely, knowing I could be catastrophically wrong, or do I invest in optionality that keeps multiple paths open but means we're less competitive in any single scenario? Which one are you? Well, how much? How much is of that is you?
I'm going to say 10% here.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Tell me more about 10% planner.
Yeah, because I think, and I tie it with the first type of decision making that, our future or the way that we envision the future is through the market that we want to serve. And that is underserved youth in Latin America. And for them, I don't need to plan that much. I'm not going after governments in the U.S., or I'm not going after the kids or schools with more affluent families. I'm going after this segment, and this is what what I want to do. This is my passion. This is what the company was built for. So that's in that case we're very clear on what the path looks like, and everything that changes in the company is comes out of the question of how do we better serve this population. Oh, there's a new technology. There's AI. Okay, does AI help this population, these kids that we want to serve? So
That's a perfect answer and a very balanced way of looking at that question, which I like, right? Not all people take that perspective, which is why I really love the way that you frame that back. So the next one is called the counter. It's the challenger of assumptions. So this persona naturally questions conventional wisdom and looks for contrarian opportunities, often finding success by zigging when others zag. So the entire education industry assumes that high quality requires high costs, better teachers, smaller class sizes, more personalized attention. But what if that assumption primarily serves the credentialing cartel and systemically excludes the populations that need education most? Deware's core thesis is contrarian. We believe you can dramatically lower costs while maintaining or even improving quality, rethinking delivery entirely. We've virtualized an entire national curriculum that traditionally required hundreds of teachers and physical infrastructure. But every potential partner, whether NGOs, governments, or schools, has been conditioned by decades of education orthodoxy to be skeptical of low-cost solutions, assuming they must be low quality. When I'm deciding whether to emphasize our cost advantages or demonstrate we can match traditional quality standards, how do I avoid the trap where challenging industry assumptions makes us seem unserious? Is there opportunity precisely because established education institutions are locked into cost structures that require excluding most of the world's students? Or am I rationalizing resource constraints into a strategic philosophy that ultimately serves fewer students than a more conventional approach? Where does that assumption challenging contrarian style of questioning fit for you?
I'm going to say 15%. I'm going to say 15% because I think that we're contrarian because uh, the founders of the company were not educators. So we looked at the problem from a different perspective, or a technology perspective of how the education problem. It's different when you say, how can I educate one person? We get the best teacher, it's a tutor, and we're going to sit this one person with this great teacher, and we're going to, the result is going to be the most amazing high schooler in the world. Perfect. That's easy. What if we have 10 students? Okay, then it's going to be a classroom. 20 students, it's going to be a classroom. We get the tutors, the best teachers. But when you start thinking about thousands of students, hundred thousands of students, then it's like a big data problem. It's like a systems approach. And that's where I think that we're contrarian. When we thought about education, we're not thinking about individual students. We're not thinking about classrooms. We're thinking about systems approach for Latin America. And we were thinking out of the box in the sense that we were not educators. We were thinking as engineers. And that has allowed us to approach the problem from a different angle, and that has been contrarian. But it was not like we meant to do that. It was not, it's just because of our background or of how we looked at the problem. So it did play a role, but it's not conscious role that we want to be contrarian.
It's one of the is less obvious, and so someone who I think is I think I heard this from Shagun, who is a very successful entrepreneur here in Birmingham, Alabama, who said it's when you find the least obvious thing. And so for me, your contrarian view is about finding the least obvious. You're finding the problem and you're navigating and saying, this is not the obvious way for this to happen. And that makes it to me kind of special. So I really
I know it
appreciate
was very interesting. It was contrarian in the sense that, online learning was not new. It was happening all over the US and Europe, but somehow it had not penetrated Latin America. And I knew the problem was there.
it. Yeah.
50% of the youth didn't achieve a high school diploma. The technology existed, or we could build it, but it was just not happening. And it seemed obvious to me. But when I talked to people, they told me I was crazy. In fact, I was doing this leadership course in a university back home, and I presented this business project to the teacher in an entrepreneurship class, and I got a average grade because she said there's no way this is going to happen
Mhm.
unless you're family with the Ministry of Education. So this is where we were coming from. Business did not happen unless you were close with government. That was what people thought. And this business case that I was making was not viable to this teacher.
Mhm.
So we were very contrarian in the context that we were coming from. But then when I went to speak with American investors, they said, that's an online school. That's nothing. That's
Right. That is nothing fantastic. We got this. Yeah. That's so interesting. Okay, here's our last one. It's called the data driver. It's an evidence-based decision maker. So this persona relies heavily on metrics, analytics, and concrete evidence to validate decisions, preferring proof over intuition. So before committing to curriculum changes or new market strategies, I ask myself, what does our data actually tell us versus what we want it to tell us? I want rigorous analysis distinguishing between metrics that validate our approach, course completion rates, assessment scores, time to credential, and the outcomes that truly matter but are harder to measure. Did the migrant student get the job they needed? Did the teenage mother gain confidence to pursue further education? Did the bullying victim rebuild their sense of self-worth? Here's the paradox. The metrics that secure partnerships and funding, enrollment numbers, completion percentages, cost per student, are available quickly. but the indicators that reveal whether we're actually transforming lives, employment outcomes, educational persistence, social integration, those often take years to materialize and are difficult to attribute. So, how do I balance the institutional need for measurable proof against the reality that the most meaningful impacts resist quantification? What do I trust? The qualitative signals from students and partners over the quantitative metrics, knowing I might be fooling myself into thinking immeasurable equals important rather than facing hard evidence that our approach isn't working. How much of you thinks about this data-driven, evidence-focused approach to questioning?
I'm so glad that we have 25% for this one.
Yes.
I think I got lucky. But yeah, definitely. 25% is a good score for this one. We
Okay.
definitely try to go after hard metrics. The opinions, the testimonies of students and parents, that's important in as a what I gain for my soul and to keep me going for all the team in the wedding. But we need hard metrics to really create a concise or to build trust with people in the markets. You know, this is our results. This is what we're doing in standardized testing. This is where our students are going after graduation, and it is hard to measure. But everything that we can measure, we try to measure. We're always trying to improve the way that that feedback loop that we get from our students, even if we can do it as fast as possible. And I think that we're really innovating in that sense, especially in comparison with traditional schools. So yeah, we definitely do try to go after hard metrics.
This has been awesome. Thank you so much for participating in my little exercise. I always have fun. It's always a good way for people to think about their different ways of decision making. So you are 50% feeler, 10% planner, 15% counter, and 25% data driver.
Yeah.
Congratulations. It's just fun. Hey, could you give one piece of advice to leaders who might be looking to build technology companies that create meaningful social impact, but while remaining financially sustainable? Can you give that advice out to our audience?
I would tell them they have to develop the superpower of being fast learners, to have the courage to being wrong and not shying away from trial and error, because you're probably going after social impact. You're probably going after problems that have been around for long, and they're not only technology problems. There could be social aspects, political aspects, and it's going to be a hard problem. And it is important that you get to break even as fast as possible, because most probably this issue that you're trying to solve is not going to be solved easily. It's not going to be, Facebook like story where you're in 5 years you're doing your IPO. It's probably going to take longer than that, and you have to be very passionate about what you're going after, because it's going to take that a lot of strength and a lot of persistence to get you to where. But at the end, it's very rewarding, because it's one thing to being able to do good for yourself, but if you can do good for yourself and also have your soul fed and be completely happy and proud of what you've built for the world, wow, that's a new level of happiness, you know?
I love that. I also believe in that. I like the outside in approach. So that's fantastic. So, Alvaro, thank you so much for your insights. Thank you for your expertise. Thank you for being so open today. Would you share with our audience where they can learn more about you and more about Deware?
Thank you, Teasha, for inviting me. It was so much fun. So yeah, they can find me at LinkedIn at Alvaro Gonzalez. You can write me there. And we also have our corporate pages at Deware and Edugogo. And then our website is dawere.com and edugogo.
Fantastic. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Remember, the best decisions come from great conversations. If you enjoyed this episode, we want you to subscribe it, rate it, share it with your network, and let's keep the conversation going on social media using Dynamic Decisions Podcast. Until next time, keep questioning, Keep growing and keep leading with purpose.